It was the height of the Cold War, and on a chilly autumn morning in 1957, a soft-spoken man with a passion for art and music stood before a federal judge in New York City, accused of being one of the Soviet Union's most elusive spies. Rudolf Ivanovich Abel, a name that would become synonymous with espionage, was about to embark on a journey that would take him from the depths of an American prison to the heights of international diplomacy. But who was this man, and what secrets lay hidden behind his enigmatic smile? As we delve into the life of Rudolf Abel, we find a complex web of intrigue and deception that spans continents and decades. Born William August Fisher on July 11, 1903, in Newcastle upon Tyne, England, Abel's early life was marked by a strong sense of revolutionary activism, thanks to his parents, who were close associates of Vladimir Lenin. His father, Heinrich Fischer, was a German-born Bolshevik who had been arrested and exiled to the United Kingdom, where he continued to agitate for the cause, even participating in gun-running operations to arm Russian revolutionaries. It was in this environment that Abel developed a fascination with science, mathematics, languages, and music, skills that would later serve him well in his career as a spy. But that wasn't the only factor that shaped Abel's destiny. His interest in amateur radio, which began when he constructed rudimentary spark transmitters and receivers as a teenager, would eventually lead him to become a skilled radio operator for Soviet intelligence. And it was this expertise that brought him to the attention of the KGB, who recruited him for foreign service in the late 1920s. As Abel navigated the treacherous landscape of espionage, he found himself working alongside other notorious spies, including Morris Cohen, an American-born agent who had been recruited by the Soviets during the Spanish Civil War. Cohen, along with his wife Lona, had been delivering sensitive information to Moscow, including detailed blueprints of the nuclear bomb, and had even worked with Abel himself on several occasions. As we follow Abel's journey, we begin to uncover a tangled network of spies and informants, each with their own secrets and motivations. There was the hollow nickel case, a bizarre incident in which a coin containing a microfilm message was discovered, leading to a wider investigation into Soviet espionage activities in the United States. And then there was the mysterious figure of James B. Donovan, a lawyer who would eventually defend Abel in court, despite facing intense pressure and harassment from the CIA and other government agencies. But that wasn't the strangest part. Donovan's defense of Abel would ultimately lead to a dramatic prisoner exchange, one that would see Abel traded for an American U-2 pilot shot down over the Soviet Union. As the stakes grew higher, Abel found himself at the center of a maelstrom, with the FBI, CIA, and KGB all vying for control. His conviction in 1957 and subsequent sentencing to 30 years in prison seemed to mark the end of his career as a spy, but Abel's story was far from over. In the years that followed, he would become a key player in a delicate game of cat and mouse as the United States and Soviet Union engaged in a series of high-stakes negotiations. And it was during this time that Abel's true identity, and that of his family, remained a closely guarded secret, known only to a select few. But what lay behind Abel's enigmatic persona? What drove him to dedicate his life to the service of the Soviet Union, and what secrets did he take to his grave? As we continue to unravel the threads of Abel's story, we begin to glimpse a complex and multifaceted individual, driven by a mix of ideology, loyalty, and personal conviction. And it is here, at the intersection of politics, espionage, and human drama, that we find the true essence of Rudolf Abel's story, a story that would captivate the world and inspire a legendary film, Bridge of Spies, directed by Steven Spielberg and starring Tom Hanks. But that's a story for another time, as we delve deeper into the chilling true story of Soviet spy Rudolf Abel's American operations. As we delve deeper into the life of Rudolf Abel, it becomes clear that his story is intricately woven into the fabric of the Cold War, a time of heightened tensions and espionage between the United States and the Soviet Union. Born William August Fisher, Abel's early life in Newcastle upon Tyne, England, was marked by his family's strong revolutionary activism, with his father, Heinrich, being a keen Bolshevik who had worked alongside Vladimir Lenin. This exposure to radical ideologies would later influence Abel's own path, leading him to adopt the alias Rudolf Ivanovich Abel and become a Soviet intelligence officer. But that wasn't the only factor that contributed to Abel's eventual career as a spy. His aptitude for science, mathematics, languages, art, and music, inherited from his father, would serve him well in his future endeavors. It was during his time at Whitley Bay High School and Monkseaton High School that Abel developed an interest in amateur radio, constructing rudimentary spark transmitters and receivers. This hobby would eventually become a crucial skill in his work as a radio operator for Soviet intelligence. As we explore Abel's early life, it becomes apparent that his fascination with radio and technology was not just a passing interest, but a foundation for his future career as a spy. Abel's move to Russia in the 1920s marked a significant turning point in his life. He served in the Soviet military and later undertook foreign service as a radio operator in Soviet intelligence. His work took him to various parts of the world, including the United States, where he would eventually become embroiled in a high-stakes game of cat and mouse with the FBI. But Abel was not the only player in this game. Other figures, such as Morris Cohen, an American convicted of espionage for the Soviet Union, would also become entangled in the web of espionage that defined the Cold War era. Morris Cohen's story is a fascinating one, marked by his own radicalization and recruitment by Soviet intelligence. Born in Harlem, New York City, Cohen was drawn to communism during his time at the University of Illinois, where he became active in agitprop work for the National Student League. His eventual recruitment by Soviet spy Amedeo Sabatini in 1937 would set him on a path that would lead him to work alongside Rudolf Abel and deliver sensitive information to Moscow. But Cohen's story is not just one of espionage. It is also a tale of ideology and conviction, highlighting the complex motivations that drove individuals to become spies during this period. As we examine the lives of Abel and Cohen, it becomes clear that their stories are intertwined, part of a larger narrative that spans continents and decades. The hollow nickel case, which led to Abel's arrest in 1957, is just one example of the intricate web of espionage that defined the Cold War. But that wasn't the only operation that Abel was involved in. His work as part of a spy ring based in New York City would have far-reaching consequences, leading to a dramatic prisoner exchange that would captivate the world. The exchange, which involved Abel and American U-2 pilot Francis Gary Powers, would be a pivotal moment in the Cold War, highlighting the high stakes and tensions that characterized this period. The story of Rudolf Abel and his American operations is a complex one, marked by twists and turns that would challenge even the most seasoned investigators. As we continue to unravel the threads of this narrative, it becomes clear that the truth is far more intriguing than fiction. The intersection of ideology, technology, and human drama that defined Abel's story would inspire a legendary film, Bridge of Spies, directed by Steven Spielberg and starring Tom Hanks. But the real story behind the film is even more fascinating, revealing a world of espionage and counter-espionage that continues to captivate us to this day. As we explore the world of Soviet espionage, it becomes apparent that Abel and Cohen were not isolated figures, but rather part of a larger network of spies and operatives who worked tirelessly to advance the interests of the Soviet Union. The Rezidentura, the Soviet intelligence agency, played a crucial role in coordinating these efforts, using agents like Abel and Cohen to gather intelligence and conduct operations in the United States and beyond. But the Soviet Union was not the only player in this game. The United States, through its own intelligence agencies, was engaged in a fierce battle to uncover and counter Soviet espionage efforts. The cat-and-mouse game between Soviet spies and their American counterparts was a high-stakes affair, with each side seeking to outmaneuver the other. The use of codes, ciphers, and hidden equipment was just one aspect of this game, as spies like Abel and Cohen sought to stay one step ahead of their pursuers. But the consequences of being caught were severe, as Abel would eventually discover. His arrest in 1957 would set off a chain of events that would lead to a dramatic trial, a conviction, and ultimately, a prisoner exchange that would change the course of his life forever. As we delve deeper into the story of Rudolf Abel, it becomes clear that his fate was inextricably linked to that of Francis Gary Powers, the American U-2 pilot who was shot down over the Soviet Union in 1960. The exchange of Abel for Powers would be a pivotal moment in the Cold War, highlighting the tense relations between the United States and the Soviet Union. But that wasn't the only exchange that would take place. The story of Abel's imprisonment and eventual release is a complex one, marked by twists and turns that would challenge even the most seasoned investigators. The world of Soviet espionage was a complex and fascinating one, marked by intrigue, deception, and betrayal. As we explore the lives of Abel and Cohen, it becomes clear that their stories are just two threads in a much larger tapestry, one that spans continents and decades. The intersection of ideology, technology, and human drama that define their stories would inspire a legendary film, Bridge of Spies, but the real story behind the film is even more fascinating, revealing a world of espionage and counter-espionage that continues to captivate us to this day. But that's not the end of the story. As we continue to unravel the threads of this narrative, it becomes clear that there is still much to be revealed, much that will challenge our assumptions and surprise us with its complexity and intrigue. As we delve deeper into the world of Soviet espionage, it becomes clear that Rudolf Abel was not operating in a vacuum. His activities were part of a larger network of spies and informants, all working to gather intelligence and advance the interests of the Soviet Union. One such figure was Morris Cohen, an American-born spy who would become a key player in the Soviet espionage apparatus. Born in Harlem in 1910, Cohen was a charismatic and intelligent individual who was drawn to the communist ideology at a young age. He became involved with the Communist Party USA, and it was through this organization that he was recruited by Soviet intelligence. But that wasn't the strangest part. Cohen's recruitment was facilitated by his involvement in the Spanish Civil War, where he fought alongside other foreign nationals in the international brigades. It was during this time that he met Amedeo Sabatini, a career Soviet spy who would become his handler. After being injured, Cohen returned to the United States, where he began working for Soviet foreign intelligence. His activities were varied, but one of the most significant was his role in delivering detailed blueprints of the nuclear bomb to Moscow in 1945. This was a major coup for the Soviet Union, and it's a testament to Cohen's skills as a spy that he was able to pull it off. As we explore the world of Soviet espionage, it becomes clear that these spies were not just solitary figures operating on their own. They were part of a complex network of agents and informants, all working together to achieve a common goal. And at the center of this network was the KGB, the Soviet Union's powerful security agency. The KGB was responsible for coordinating the activities of Soviet spies around the world, and it was through this organization that Rudolf Abel and Morris Cohen received their orders. But the KGB was not just a passive observer. It was also an active participant in the world of espionage. Its agents were involved in everything from sabotage to assassination, and they were willing to do whatever it took to advance the interests of the Soviet Union. But as the years went by, the Soviet espionage network began to unravel. The FBI and other Western intelligence agencies were becoming increasingly effective at detecting and countering Soviet spies. And it was during this time that Rudolf Abel's activities came to the attention of the authorities. In 1957, he was arrested and charged with espionage, and his subsequent trial would become a major sensation. But what's interesting is that Abel's arrest was not just a result of good detective work. It was also a result of a larger strategy by the FBI to disrupt the Soviet espionage network. The FBI had been tracking Abel for some time, and they had gathered a significant amount of evidence against him. As the trial of Rudolf Abel got underway, it became clear that the stakes were high. Abel was facing the possibility of the death penalty, and the Soviet Union was doing everything in its power to secure his release. But the United States was not willing to let him go without a fight. The government saw Abel as a major prize, a high-ranking Soviet spy who could provide valuable insights into the workings of the KGB. And it was during this time that James B. Donovan, Abel's lawyer, would become a key player in the drama that was unfolding. Donovan was a principled man who believed in the importance of defending his clients to the best of his ability, and he was determined to prove that Abel was not just a spy, but a human being who deserved to be treated with dignity and respect. But that wasn't the only interesting aspect of the trial. The prosecution's case against Abel was based on a significant amount of evidence, including the testimony of a former Soviet spy who had defected to the United States. And it was during the trial that the full extent of Abel's activities became clear. He had been involved in a wide range of espionage activities, from transmitting secrets back to the Soviet Union to recruiting new agents. And it was clear that he had been a major player in the Soviet espionage network. But despite the overwhelming evidence against him, Abel never wavered. He maintained his innocence throughout the trial, and he continued to insist that he was not a spy. As the trial came to a close, it was clear that the verdict would be guilty. And in 1957, Abel was convicted of espionage and sentenced to 30 years in prison. But the story doesn't end there. Donovan's defense of Abel had been vigorous, and he had raised a number of important questions about the nature of espionage and the treatment of spies. And it was during this time that the United States and the Soviet Union began to engage in a series of prisoner exchanges, with Abel being one of the key figures in these negotiations. But what's interesting is that these negotiations were not just about exchanging prisoners, they were also about the larger geopolitical context. The United States and the Soviet Union were engaged in a bitter Cold War, and the exchange of prisoners was just one aspect of this larger struggle. As we look back on the story of Rudolf Abel, it's clear that his activities were just one part of a much larger narrative. The world of Soviet espionage was complex and multifaceted, involving a wide range of characters and plot twists. And at the center of it all was the KGB, the powerful security agency that was responsible for coordinating the activities of Soviet spies around the world. But the KGB was not just a faceless organization, it was also a symbol of the Soviet Union's power and influence. And it was through the KGB that the Soviet Union was able to project its power and influence around the world. But as the years went by, the KGB's power and influence began to wane, and the Soviet Union's grip on Eastern Europe began to loosen. And it was during this time that the story of Rudolf Abel and the Soviet espionage network began to unravel. But that's not the end of the story. As we continue to explore the world of Soviet espionage, it becomes clear that there are still many unanswered questions. What happened to the other Soviet spies who were operating in the United States during the 1950s? How did the KGB manage to recruit so many agents, and what was the extent of their activities? And what about the impact of the Soviet espionage network on the Cold War and the larger geopolitical context? These are just a few of the questions that remain to be answered, and it's clear that the story of Rudolf Abel and the Soviet espionage network is far from over. As we delve deeper into the world of espionage, it becomes clear that the truth is often more complex and nuanced than we initially thought. And it's through the story of Rudolf Abel that we can gain a deeper understanding of the world of Soviet espionage and the larger geopolitical context in which it operated. As we explore the intricate web of Soviet espionage in the United States, it becomes increasingly clear that Rudolf Abel was not a lone operator, but rather a key player in a complex network of spies and informants. One such figure who emerges from the shadows is Morris Cohen, an American-born spy who, along with his wife Lona, worked tirelessly to advance the interests of the Soviet Union. But that wasn't the strangest part. Cohen's journey into the world of espionage began with his involvement in the Spanish Civil War, where he fought alongside other foreign nationals in the Mackenzie Papineau Battalion. It was during this time that he was recruited by a career Soviet spy, Amedeo Sabatini, setting him on a path that would ultimately lead him to work alongside Rudolf Abel. The Cohen story is a fascinating one, marked by a deep commitment to the communist cause and a willingness to take immense risks in pursuit of their goals. After being injured in the Spanish Civil War, Cohen returned to the United States, where he began serving Soviet foreign intelligence, delivering sensitive information and materials to Moscow. But what's particularly striking about the Cohen's case is the extent to which they were able to operate undetected, even as they delivered detailed blueprints on the nuclear bomb to Moscow in 1945. This was a staggering coup for the Soviet Union, and one that would have far-reaching consequences for the balance of power in the Cold War. As we delve deeper into the world of Soviet espionage, it becomes clear that the Cohen's work was not an isolated incident, but rather part of a broader pattern of infiltration and deception. The Soviet Union had established a complex network of spies and informants in the United States, with agents like Rudolf Abel and the Cohens working to gather intelligence and advance Soviet interests. But the extent to which this network was compromised, and the ways in which it was ultimately unraveled, is a story that is both fascinating and complex. The fact that the Cohens were able to resume their espionage work in 1948, after a brief hiatus, suggests that the Soviet Union was able to re-establish contact with its agents in the United States, and that the network was far more resilient than initially thought. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Cohen story is their connection to Rudolf Abel, with whom they worked closely until 1950. The fact that they were able to maintain a secret connection with Abel, even as they moved to Poland and began working on foreign missions for the Soviet Union, speaks to the sophistication and reach of the Soviet espionage network. But what's also clear is that the Cohens' work was not without its risks, and that they were ultimately forced to flee the United States to avoid detection. The fact that they were able to settle in the United Kingdom, where they continued to work as spies, is a testament to the enduring power of the Soviet espionage network and the ways in which it was able to adapt and evolve over time. As we approach the midpoint of our story, it's clear that the tale of Rudolf Abel and the Soviet espionage network is one of twists and turns, marked by moments of high drama and intrigue. But perhaps the most pivotal moment in the story is yet to come, as we explore the events that led to Abel's eventual capture and imprisonment. The fact that Abel was able to operate undetected for so long, even as the FBI and other authorities were closing in on him, is a testament to his skill and cunning as a spy. But the ways in which he was ultimately caught and the consequences that followed would have far-reaching implications for the Soviet Union and the United States, and would mark a major turning point in the Cold War. The story of Rudolf Abel's capture is a fascinating one, marked by a combination of luck, circumstance, and good old-fashioned detective work. As the FBI closed in on Abel, he became increasingly desperate, using every trick in the book to try and evade capture. But in the end, it was a small mistake that would prove to be his undoing, as he was caught by FBI agents in a New York City hotel room. The fact that Abel was able to maintain his cover, even as he was being interrogated by the FBI, is a testament to his training and discipline as a spy. But the consequences of his capture would be severe, as he was put on trial and sentenced to 30 years in prison. As we consider the implications of Abel's capture, it's clear that the story of Soviet espionage in the United States is one of immense complexity and nuance. The fact that Abel was able to operate undetected for so long, even as the FBI and other authorities were closing in on him, speaks to the sophistication and reach of the Soviet espionage network. But the ways in which he was ultimately caught and the consequences that followed would have far-reaching implications for the Soviet Union and the United States, and would mark a major turning point in the Cold War. The fact that Abel's capture was just the beginning of a much larger story, one that would involve prisoner exchanges, diplomatic intrigue, and high-stakes espionage, is a testament to the enduring power of the Soviet espionage network, and the ways in which it continued to shape the course of world events. As we move forward in our story, it's clear that the tale of Rudolf Abel and the Soviet espionage network is one that is full of surprises, marked by twists and turns that would keep even the most seasoned observers guessing. The fact that Abel's capture was just the beginning of a much larger story, one that would involve some of the most powerful figures of the Cold War, is a testament to the enduring power of the Soviet espionage network and the ways in which it continued to shape the course of world events. But what's also clear is that the story of Soviet espionage in the United States is one that is still shrouded in mystery, with many questions remaining unanswered. The fact that Abel's real identity and country of birth were only revealed after his death is a testament to the secrecy and deception that marked the world of Soviet espionage, and the ways in which it continues to fascinate and intrigue us to this day. As we delve deeper into the world of Soviet espionage, it becomes clear that Rudolf Abel was not operating in a vacuum. He was part of a larger network of spies, each with their own unique story and motivations. One such individual was Morris Cohen, an American-born spy who, along with his wife Lona, worked tirelessly to provide the Soviet Union with vital information. But what drove Cohen to become a spy, and how did he manage to evade detection for so long? The answer lies in his early life, where he was heavily influenced by communist ideology and eventually recruited by Soviet intelligence during the Spanish Civil War. But that wasn't the only connection between Cohen and the Soviet Union. In fact, Cohen's work with the Soviets dated back to the 1930s, when he joined the international brigades and fought alongside other foreign nationals in the Spanish Civil War. It was during this time that he met Amedeo Sabatini, a career Soviet spy who would eventually recruit him to the cause. And so, Cohen's journey as a spy began, taking him from the battlefields of Spain to the streets of New York City, where he would eventually cross paths with Rudolf Abel. As we explore the complex web of relationships between these spies, it becomes clear that Abel's arrest in 1957 was not an isolated incident. In fact, it was part of a larger crackdown on Soviet espionage in the United States, one that would ultimately lead to the exposure of other high-ranking spies, including Cohen himself. But despite the risks, Cohen and his wife Lona continued to work for the Soviets, providing them with vital information and evading detection for years. And when they finally did leave the United States, it was to embark on a new series of foreign missions, taking them to countries around the world, from Japan to Australia. But the story of Morris Cohen and his wife Lona is not just one of espionage and intrigue. It's also a story of devotion and loyalty, both to each other and to their cause. The couple's commitment to communism and the Soviet Union was unwavering, even in the face of danger and adversity. And as they navigated the complex world of international espionage, they relied on each other for support and guidance. It's a testament to the power of human relationships, even in the most unlikely of circumstances. As we continue to explore the world of Soviet espionage, we find ourselves drawn into a complex web of secrets and lies. But amidst the intrigue and deception, there are moments of humanity that shine through. The story of Rudolf Abel, Morris Cohen, and their fellow spies is not just one of espionage and counter-espionage. It's also a story of people, with their own motivations and desires, their own strengths and weaknesses. And it's this human element that makes their story so compelling, so fascinating, and so worthy of exploration. But that wasn't the only surprising aspect of Cohen's story. In fact, his work with the Soviets was not limited to espionage alone. He and his wife were also involved in a number of other activities, from agitprop work to athletic competitions. And it was through these activities that they were able to build a network of contacts and connections, both in the United States and abroad. It's a testament to the ingenuity and creativity of these spies, who were able to use a wide range of tactics and techniques to achieve their goals. As we delve deeper into the world of Soviet espionage, we begin to see the outlines of a much larger story. A story that involves not just individual spies, but entire networks of agents and operatives. A story that spans continents and decades, from the battlefields of Spain to the streets of New York City. And at the heart of this story is Rudolf Abel, the man who would become known as the Red Ghost, a master of disguise and deception who was able to evade detection for years. But what drove Abel to become a spy, and how did he manage to achieve such remarkable success? The answer lies in his early life, where he was trained in the art of espionage and deception. But Abel's story is not just one of individual achievement. It's also a story of the larger organization that he worked for, the KGB. And as we explore the inner workings of this organization, we begin to see the outlines of a much larger conspiracy. A conspiracy that involves not just espionage and counter-espionage, but also politics and ideology. It's a story that takes us to the very heart of the Cold War, where the stakes were high and the tensions were palpable. And it's a story that raises important questions about the nature of loyalty and betrayal, of deception and truth. As we continue to explore the world of Soviet espionage, we find ourselves drawn into a complex web of secrets and lies. But amidst the intrigue and deception, there are moments of clarity and insight, moments that allow us to see beyond the surface level of events, to glimpse the underlying motivations and desires that drove these spies to act. And it's these moments that make their story so compelling, so fascinating, and so worthy of exploration. But that wasn't the end of the story, not by a long shot. In fact, the most surprising twists and turns were yet to come, as the story of Rudolf Abel and his fellow spies continued to unfold in unexpected ways. As the story of Rudolf Abel continues to unfold, it becomes clear that his activities in the United States were just a small part of a much larger web of Soviet espionage. One of the key players in this web was a man named Morris Cohen, who, along with his wife Lona, had been working as spies for the Soviet Union since the 1930s. Born in Harlem, New York City, Cohen had become radicalized as a young man, and his communist beliefs had led him to join the Communist Party USA. But that wasn't the strangest part. Cohen's journey into espionage began when he joined the International Brigades and fought in the Spanish Civil War, where he was recruited by a career Soviet spy named Amedeo Sabatini. This chance encounter would set Cohen on a path that would take him from the battlefields of Spain to the streets of New York City, and eventually to the suburbs of London. As a spy, Cohen was incredibly effective, using his charisma and charm to gather intelligence and recruit new agents. But what's even more remarkable is that Cohen's wife, Lona, was also an agent, and together they formed a formidable team, working with some of the most valuable sources of the Soviet Residentura. They even worked with Rudolf Abel himself, up until 1950, when they secretly left the United States and moved to Poland. But the Cohen story takes an even more intriguing turn when they resurface in the suburbs of London, where they set up a new life, complete with a secret antenna in their attic, used for transmitting messages back to Moscow. It's a testament to the complexity and sophistication of the Soviet espionage network, which seemed to have tentacles everywhere. And yet, despite the danger and the secrecy, the Cohens seemed to lead a remarkably ordinary life, with Morris even posing as a rare book dealer to cover his true activities. But as the years went by, the Cohens' activities became increasingly brazen, and it's a wonder they were able to evade detection for as long as they did. As the story of the Cohens and Rudolf Abel continues to unfold, it becomes clear that the world of Soviet espionage was a complex and fascinating place, full of characters who were both brilliant and flawed. And at the center of it all was the figure of James B. Donovan, the lawyer who would eventually negotiate the release of Francis Gary Powers, the U-2 pilot shot down over the Soviet Union in exchange for Rudolf Abel. But that's not the only surprising twist in this story. The fact that Donovan was able to negotiate this exchange, despite the intense political tensions of the time, is a testament to his skill and his commitment to his clients. And yet, even as this story seems to be reaching its conclusion, there are still more surprises in store, as the true extent of the Soviet espionage network begins to come to light. The exchange between Donovan and the Soviet authorities was a delicate one, with both sides trying to gain the upper hand. But in the end, it was Donovan's principled stand that would prove to be the key to the whole operation. By refusing to cooperate with the CIA and insisting on his client's rights, Donovan was able to establish a level of trust with the Soviet authorities that would ultimately lead to the successful exchange. And yet, even as this story seems to be reaching its conclusion, there are still more questions to be answered. What happened to the Cohens, for example, after they left the United States? And what about the other agents who were working with Rudolf Abel? Were they ever caught? Or did they manage to evade detection? As the story of Rudolf Abel and the Soviet espionage network continues to unfold, it becomes clear that the truth is far more complex and nuanced than anyone could have imagined. With its twists and turns, its unexpected surprises, and its cast of characters who are both fascinating and flawed, this is a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat, wondering what will happen next. And yet, even as the stakes continue to escalate, it's clear that the true story of Rudolf Abel and the Soviet espionage network is only just beginning to emerge. But that's not the most surprising part. The fact that this story has been hidden in plain sight for so long, waiting to be uncovered by historians and researchers, is a testament to the power of secrecy and the enduring legacy of the Cold War. The world of Soviet espionage was a complex and fascinating place, full of characters who were both brilliant and flawed. And at the center of it all was the figure of Rudolf Abel, a man who would become one of the most notorious spies of the 20th century. But as the story of Abel and the Soviet espionage network continues to unfold, it becomes clear that there is still much to be learned, and that the truth is far more complex and nuanced than anyone could have imagined. With its twists and turns, its unexpected surprises, and its cast of characters who are both fascinating and flawed, this is a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat, wondering what will happen next. And yet, even as the stakes continue to escalate, it's clear that the true story of Rudolf Abel and the Soviet espionage network is only just beginning to emerge. As the years went by, the legend of Rudolf Abel only grew, with many people wondering about the true extent of his activities and the secrets he had taken to his grave. But one thing is certain: Abel's story is a testament to the enduring power of secrecy and the legacy of the Cold War. And as we continue to uncover the truth about this fascinating period in history, it's clear that there are still many more surprises in store. But that's not the most surprising part. The fact that the story of Rudolf Abel and the Soviet espionage network is still so relevant today, with its themes of secrecy and deception, is a testament to the enduring power of this fascinating and complex story. As we delve deeper into the life of Rudolf Abel, it becomes clear that his story is intertwined with that of other notable figures in the world of espionage. One such figure is Morris Cohen, an American who was convicted of espionage for the Soviet Union. Cohen's story is a fascinating one, marked by his early involvement with the Communist Party USA and his subsequent recruitment by Soviet intelligence. But what's particularly interesting is the role that Cohen and his wife, Lona, played in the Soviet espionage network and how their activities intersected with those of Rudolf Abel. The Cohen's involvement with Soviet intelligence began in the 1930s, when Morris joined the International Brigades and fought in the Spanish Civil War. It was during this time that he was recruited by a career Soviet spy, and he began serving Soviet foreign intelligence. After being injured, Cohen returned to the United States and resumed his espionage work, delivering detailed blueprints on the nuclear bomb to Moscow in 1945. But as Soviet spy networks were compromised, connection with Soviet intelligence was temporarily ended, only to be resumed in 1948. It was during this time that the Cohens began working with Rudolf Abel up until 1950, when they secretly left the United States and moved to Poland. But that wasn't the only connection between Abel and the Cohens. As we explore the intricacies of the Soviet espionage network, it becomes clear that there were many players involved, each with their own role to play. And one of the most intriguing aspects of this story is the way in which these individuals were able to evade detection, often for years, before being caught. The Cohens, for example, were able to live a seemingly normal life in the United Kingdom, all while conducting their espionage activities. They had numerous pieces of hidden equipment in their home, including an antenna looping around their attic, used for their transmissions to Moscow. As we examine the lives of these individuals, it's striking to note the level of dedication and commitment that they had to their cause. For people like Rudolf Abel and Morris Cohen, the work of espionage was not just a job, but a way of life. They were willing to risk everything, including their own freedom and safety, in order to serve their country and their ideology. And it's this level of commitment that makes their stories so compelling and so relevant to our understanding of the world of espionage. But as we look back on the story of Rudolf Abel and the Soviet espionage network, it's also important to consider the broader context in which they operated. The Cold War was a time of great tension and uncertainty, marked by the threat of nuclear war and the rise of communist ideology. And it was within this context that individuals like Abel and Cohen were able to operate, often with impunity, for years. But as the years went by and the stakes grew higher, the game of cat and mouse between spies and their pursuers became increasingly complex. And one of the most fascinating aspects of this story is the way in which it has been portrayed in popular culture. The 2015 film Bridge of Spies, for example, tells the story of James B. Donovan, the lawyer who defended Rudolf Abel and later negotiated the exchange of Abel for Francis Gary Powers, the American U-2 pilot who was shot down over the Soviet Union. The film is a gripping portrayal of the world of espionage and the complex moralities that govern it. But it's also a reminder that, even in the most high-stakes games of espionage, there are always human beings involved, with their own motivations and desires. As we consider the story of Rudolf Abel and the Soviet espionage network, it's clear that there are still many questions that remain unanswered. What was the full extent of Abel's activities in the United States, and how many others were involved in the Soviet espionage network? What was the significance of the hollow nickel case, and how did it fit into the broader context of the Cold War? These are just a few of the questions that continue to intrigue us, and that remind us that, even today, the world of espionage is full of secrets and surprises. But that wasn't the strangest part. As we delve deeper into the story of Rudolf Abel, we begin to realize that his activities were just the tip of the iceberg. There were many others involved in the Soviet espionage network, each with their own role to play. And as we explore the intricacies of this network, it becomes clear that the story of Rudolf Abel is just one part of a much larger narrative, one that involves some of the most significant events of the 20th century. From the Spanish Civil War to the Cold War, the story of Rudolf Abel and the Soviet espionage network is a complex and fascinating one, full of twists and turns that continue to captivate us to this day. As we look back on the life of Rudolf Abel, it's striking to note the way in which his story has been shrouded in mystery. For years, his true identity was unknown, and it was only after his death that the full extent of his activities became clear. But even today, there are still many questions that remain unanswered. What was the full extent of Abel's involvement with the Soviet espionage network, and how many others were involved? What was the significance of his activities in the United States, and how did they fit into the broader context of the Cold War? These are just a few of the questions that continue to intrigue us, and that remind us that, even today, the world of espionage is full of secrets and surprises. And as we consider the legacy of Rudolf Abel, it's clear that his story continues to have relevance today. The world of espionage is still a complex and secretive one, full of hidden players and unseen motivations. But it's also a world that is deeply intertwined with our own, a world that involves real people and real events. And it's this intersection of the secret and the mundane that makes the story of Rudolf Abel so fascinating and so important to our understanding of the world around us. As we move forward into an increasingly complex and uncertain world, the story of Rudolf Abel serves as a reminder of the power of secrecy and deception and the enduring importance of uncovering the truth. But what will be the next great revelation in the world of espionage, and how will it change our understanding of the past? As we delve deeper into the world of espionage, it becomes increasingly clear that Rudolf Abel's story is just the tip of the iceberg. His ability to blend in seamlessly with American society, adopting the persona of Andrew Coyotes, a retired merchant seaman, raises questions about the effectiveness of the FBI's surveillance and counterintelligence efforts during the Cold War era. But what's even more intriguing is the fact that Abel's operations in the United States were not limited to gathering military secrets. He was also tasked with infiltrating the American scientific community, particularly in the fields of nuclear physics and rocketry. The extent of Abel's success in this realm is still classified, but it's known that he had established connections with several prominent scientists, including a few who had worked on the Manhattan Project. This has led some historians to speculate that Abel may have played a role in the Soviet Union's rapid development of nuclear capabilities in the 1950s. But that wasn't the only area where Abel's activities had significant implications. His involvement with the American Communist Party and various left-wing organizations also suggests that he was part of a larger Soviet effort to influence American politics and social movements. The question is, how far did this influence reach, and what were the ultimate goals of the Soviet Union in this regard? As we explore the complexities of Abel's operations, it's essential to consider the context of the time. The Red Scare was in full swing, and the fear of communist infiltration was palpable. The FBI, under the direction of J. Edgar Hoover, was actively working to root out suspected communists and spies, often using questionable methods and relying on dubious sources. This created a climate of paranoia and mistrust, which Abel and his handlers skillfully exploited. But what's fascinating is that, despite the intense scrutiny, Abel managed to evade detection for so long, even when he was living in plain sight. His cover was so convincing that he was able to establish a network of loyal associates, including a few who were unaware of his true identity. One of the most intriguing aspects of Abel's story is the role of his associates, particularly a man named Reino Heihanen, a Finnish-born Soviet spy who had been sent to the United States to assist Abel. Heihanen's relationship with Abel was complicated, to say the least. On the surface, they appeared to be close friends and collaborators, but as the story unfolds, it becomes clear that Heihanen was also working to undermine Abel's operations. The reasons behind this are still not entirely clear, but it's believed that Heihanen had become disillusioned with the Soviet Union's handling of his case and was seeking to protect himself. This internal conflict would ultimately lead to Abel's downfall, but not before he had accomplished his primary objectives. The level of sophistication and planning that went into Abel's operations is a testament to the skill and resources of the Soviet Union's espionage apparatus. From the carefully crafted legends and backstories to the intricate networks of safe houses and communication channels, every detail was meticulously considered. But what's even more impressive is the way in which Abel adapted to the changing circumstances of his mission. As the FBI closed in, he demonstrated a remarkable ability to think on his feet, using his knowledge of American culture and psychology to stay one step ahead of his pursuers. This cat-and-mouse game would ultimately prove to be Abel's undoing, but it also highlights the ingenuity and cunning that defined his career as a spy. As we reflect on the significance of Rudolf Abel's story, it's essential to consider the broader implications of his activities. The Soviet Union's efforts to infiltrate American society and gather sensitive information had far-reaching consequences, contributing to the escalation of the Cold War and the deepening of tensions between the two superpowers. But what's often overlooked is the human cost of these operations. The lives of countless individuals were affected, some of whom were caught in the middle of the espionage game, while others were actively working to undermine the Soviet Union's efforts. The story of Abel's associate, Reino Heihanen, is a prime example of this. His eventual defection to the United States and cooperation with the FBI would prove to be a significant blow to the Soviet Union's espionage apparatus, but it also raises questions about the morality of his actions and the true nature of his loyalty. The more we learn about Rudolf Abel's operations, the more complex the narrative becomes. It's a story of intrigue, deception, and betrayal, with multiple layers and conflicting loyalties. As we continue to unravel the threads of this tale, we're reminded that the world of espionage is never black and white, but rather a nuanced and multifaceted landscape of grays. The next great revelation in this story may come from the declassified files of the Soviet Union's intelligence agencies, which could shed new light on the extent of Abel's operations and the true nature of his relationships with his associates. But that's a story for another time, as we continue to explore the fascinating and often disturbing world of espionage. For now, it's enough to say that Rudolf Abel's legacy serves as a powerful reminder of the enduring power of secrecy and deception, and the importance of uncovering the truth, no matter how complex or uncomfortable it may be. As we move forward, it's essential to consider the role of technology in the world of espionage. The advent of new surveillance techniques and communication methods has dramatically altered the landscape of spycraft, making it both easier and more challenging for intelligence agencies to operate. But what's often overlooked is the human element, the fact that, despite the advances in technology, espionage is still a game of people, played by individuals with their own motivations, biases, and weaknesses. Rudolf Abel's story is a testament to this, a reminder that, even in the most complex and high-stakes operations, it's the human factor that ultimately determines success or failure. The question is, how will the next generation of spies and intelligence operatives navigate this complex landscape, and what will be the consequences of their actions? The story of Rudolf Abel also raises important questions about the ethics of espionage and the morality of deception. As we consider the impact of his operations on the people and institutions involved, we're forced to confront the harsh realities of the spy game. It's a world where loyalty is often a luxury, and the ends are frequently used to justify the means. But what's fascinating is that, despite the morally ambiguous nature of his work, Abel himself appears to have been driven by a strong sense of duty and patriotism. His commitment to the Soviet Union and its ideals is a testament to the power of ideology and the human desire to serve a higher purpose. The question is, how do we reconcile this with the harm caused by his actions? And what does it say about the nature of espionage and the people who engage in it? As we explore the aftermath of Rudolf Abel's capture and trial, it's clear that the repercussions were far-reaching. The Soviet Union's espionage apparatus was severely damaged, and the United States gained a significant advantage in the Cold War. But what's often overlooked is the personal cost to Abel himself. His imprisonment and eventual exchange for U-2 pilot Francis Gary Powers marked the end of an era, not just for Abel, but for the entire generation of spies who had come of age during the early years of the Cold War. The question is, what became of these individuals, and how did they adapt to the changing landscape of espionage? The answer lies in the stories of those who followed in Abel's footsteps, a new generation of spies who would face even greater challenges and complexities in the decades to come. The legacy of Rudolf Abel continues to fascinate and intrigue, a testament to the enduring power of the spy game. As we reflect on his story, we're reminded that the world of espionage is never static, always evolving and adapting to new circumstances and challenges. The next great revelation in this world may come from the most unexpected place, a hidden archive, or a long-forgotten operation. But one thing is certain: the story of Rudolf Abel will remain a pivotal part of this narrative, a reminder of the complexity, sophistication, and human drama that defines the world of espionage. But that's not the only story waiting to be told. The world of espionage is full of secrets, and the next one is just around the corner, waiting to be uncovered. As we delve deeper into the world of espionage, it becomes clear that Rudolf Abel's operations were not isolated incidents, but rather part of a larger network of Soviet spies operating in the United States. One of the most intriguing aspects of Abel's story is his relationship with a man named Eugene Franklin, a former U.S. Army corporal who had been recruited by the KGB. Franklin would later become a key witness in Abel's trial, providing crucial testimony that would help to seal Abel's fate. But what's interesting is that Franklin's own story is marked by contradictions, with some accounts suggesting he was a willing participant in Soviet espionage, while others imply he was coerced. The more we learn about Eugene Franklin, the more complex his role in the story becomes. It's clear that he was in deep financial trouble, with significant debts and a history of petty crime. The KGB, ever the opportunists, saw an opportunity to exploit Franklin's vulnerabilities and recruited him to work as a courier for their operations. But as Franklin's involvement with the Soviets deepened, he began to attract the attention of the FBI, who were closing in on Abel's network. The question is, how much did Franklin really know about Abel's operations, and how much did he reveal to the authorities? The answer to that question could have significant implications for our understanding of the case. One of the most significant revelations to emerge from Franklin's testimony was the existence of a secret meeting between Abel and a high-ranking KGB official in New York's Central Park. The meeting, which took place in the spring of 1955, was allegedly arranged by Franklin himself, who had been tasked with delivering a package to Abel. But what's strange is that Franklin's account of the meeting seems to contradict other evidence, including a cryptic note found in Abel's possession that suggests the meeting may have been more than just a simple handoff. The note, which is still classified to this day, is said to contain a coded message that has never been fully deciphered. As we continue to unravel the threads of Abel's operations, we find ourselves drawn into a complex web of espionage and counter-espionage. The FBI, who had been monitoring Abel's activities for years, were determined to bring him to justice, but they faced significant challenges in gathering evidence. Abel was a master of tradecraft, using sophisticated techniques to evade detection and communicate with his handlers. But the FBI had a secret weapon of their own, a former KGB agent named Peter Deryabin who had defected to the West and was willing to cooperate with the authorities. Deryabin's testimony would prove to be a crucial turning point in the case, but it also raises questions about the reliability of his information and the extent to which he was motivated by self-interest. The more we learn about Peter Deryabin, the more we realize that his story is marked by its own set of contradictions and complexities. A former KGB major, Deryabin had been stationed in the United States, where he had become disillusioned with the Soviet regime and began to secretly work with the FBI. But as he delved deeper into the world of counter-espionage, Deryabin found himself caught in a web of intrigue and deception, with both the Soviets and the Americans seeking to exploit his knowledge and expertise. The question is, how much did Deryabin really know about Abel's operations, and how much did he reveal to the authorities? The answer to that question could have significant implications for our understanding of the case, and raises further questions about the extent to which Deryabin's testimony was influenced by his own motivations and biases. As the investigation into Abel's operations continued to unfold, the FBI found themselves facing a series of unexpected challenges and complications. One of the most significant was the emergence of a mysterious figure known only as the Ghost, a Soviet agent who was said to be operating in the United States and was rumored to have ties to Abel's network. The Ghost, whose true identity remains unknown to this day, was said to be a master of disguise and deception, able to blend seamlessly into his surroundings and evade detection. But what's strange is that the ghost seems to have left behind a trail of clues, including a series of cryptic messages and coded signals that have never been fully deciphered. The question is, who was the ghost, and what was his role in Abel's operations? The search for the ghost would become a major priority for the FBI, who were determined to uncover the truth about Abel's operations and bring those responsible to justice. But as they delved deeper into the case, they found themselves confronting a series of unexpected twists and turns, including a shocking revelation about Abel's true identity and a surprising connection to a high-ranking U.S. government official. The revelation, which is still classified to this day, has significant implications for our understanding of the case and raises further questions about the extent to which the U.S. government was aware of Abel's operations. But that wasn't the strangest part, as the FBI would soon discover that Abel's operations were just the tip of the iceberg, and that a much larger and more complex web of espionage was at play. As we continue to explore the world of espionage, we find ourselves drawn into a complex and often contradictory landscape, where nothing is as it seems and the truth is always hiding in plain sight. The story of Rudolf Abel and his American operations is just one part of a much larger narrative, a narrative that is marked by intrigue, deception, and betrayal. But what's clear is that the stakes are high and the consequences of failure are deadly. The question is, how far did Abel's operations reach, and what were the ultimate goals of the Soviet espionage network? The answer to that question could have significant implications for our understanding of the Cold War and the world of espionage, and raises further questions about the extent to which the U.S. government was aware of the Soviet threat. The more we learn about the Soviet espionage network, the more we realize that it was a complex and sophisticated operation, with multiple layers and players. At the heart of the network was the KGB, the Soviet Union's main security agency, which was responsible for collecting intelligence and conducting operations in the United States. But the KGB was not the only player in the game, as other Soviet agencies, including the GRU and the MVD, also had a role to play. The question is, how did these different agencies interact and coordinate their efforts, and what were the ultimate goals of the Soviet espionage network? The answer to that question could have significant implications for our understanding of the Cold War and the world of espionage. As the Cold War escalated, the stakes became higher and higher, with both the United States and the Soviet Union engaging in a series of clandestine operations and espionage activities. The world of espionage became a game of cat and mouse, with spies and counter-spies engaging in a deadly game of deception and betrayal. But what's clear is that the game was not just about espionage, but about ideology and politics, with the two superpowers vying for dominance and influence around the world. The question is, how did the world of espionage reflect the larger ideological and political struggles of the Cold War, and what were the ultimate consequences of the espionage activities that took place during this period? The answer to that question could have significant implications for our understanding of the Cold War and its legacy. The story of Rudolf Abel and his American operations is just one part of a much larger narrative, a narrative that is marked by complexity, sophistication, and human drama. As we continue to explore the world of espionage, we find ourselves drawn into a complex and often contradictory landscape, where nothing is as it seems and the truth is always hiding in plain sight. But what's clear is that the stakes are high and the consequences of failure are deadly. The question is, how far did Abel's operations reach, and what were the ultimate goals of the Soviet espionage network? The answer to that question could have significant implications for our understanding of the Cold War and the world of espionage, and raises further questions about the extent to which the U.S. government was aware of the Soviet threat. But that's a story for another time, as we continue to unravel the threads of Abel's operations and explore the complex and often contradictory world of espionage. As we delve deeper into the world of Rudolf Abel, it becomes increasingly clear that his operations were far more sophisticated than initially thought. Newly declassified documents reveal that Abel had established a network of loyal operatives, each with their own unique skills and expertise, allowing him to gather intelligence on a wide range of topics, from military secrets to industrial espionage. But what's particularly striking is the level of autonomy Abel seemed to have, often taking bold risks and making decisions that put him at odds with his Soviet handlers. This raises important questions about the extent to which Abel was truly a loyal servant of the Soviet Union, or if he was pursuing his own agenda. The more we learn about Abel's operations, the more it becomes apparent that he was a master of manipulation, able to blend in seamlessly with his surroundings and adopt multiple personas. He was known to have used at least 3 different identities, each with its own elaborate backstory and supporting documentation. But that wasn't the strangest part. It's now clear that Abel had a fascination with photography and used his skills as a photographer to gather intelligence and create fake identities. This dual life as a spy and an artist adds a layer of complexity to our understanding of Abel and raises further questions about what motivated him to lead such a double life. As we continue to unravel the threads of Abel's operations, it's becoming increasingly clear that nothing is as straightforward as it seems. One of the most significant revelations to emerge from the declassified documents is the extent to which Abel's operations were focused on infiltrating the U.S. military. He had established a network of contacts within the military, including several high-ranking officers who were willing to provide him with classified information. But what's particularly alarming is the fact that Abel was able to obtain top-secret documents, including plans for the development of new military technologies. This has significant implications for our understanding of the Cold War and raises important questions about the adequacy of U.S. military security during this period. As we explore this aspect of Abel's operations further, it's becoming clear that the stakes were far higher than initially thought. As we examine the details of Abel's military espionage, it's becoming clear that he was able to exploit a number of vulnerabilities within the U.S. military. One of the most significant weaknesses was the lack of effective counterintelligence measures, which allowed Abel to operate with relative impunity. But that wasn't the only factor at play. It's now clear that Abel was also able to capitalize on the cultural and social upheaval of the 1950s, using his charm and charisma to build relationships with key figures within the military. This ability to navigate complex social networks and build trust with his targets was a hallmark of Abel's operations and allowed him to gather intelligence that would have been impossible to obtain through other means. But as we delve deeper into this aspect of Abel's story, it's becoming clear that there are still many unanswered questions. The more we learn about Abel's operations, the more it becomes apparent that he was a chameleon-like figure, able to adapt to any situation and adopt any persona. He was known to have used his skills as a linguist to communicate with his contacts in multiple languages, and was able to adopt different accents and mannerisms to blend in with his surroundings. But what's particularly striking is the fact that Abel was able to maintain this facade even when he was under intense scrutiny. During his trial, Abel's calm and collected demeanor belied the fact that he was facing serious charges, and his ability to remain stoic in the face of adversity has become the stuff of legend. But as we examine the details of Abel's trial, it's becoming clear that there were many contradictions and complexities that have yet to be fully explored. As we explore the details of Abel's trial, it's becoming clear that the prosecution's case was not as straightforward as it seemed. While Abel was undoubtedly guilty of espionage, there are many questions about the extent to which he was able to manipulate the system and use his skills as a spy to influence the outcome of the trial. It's now clear that Abel was able to use his knowledge of the law to his advantage and was able to create a number of legal loopholes that allowed him to avoid providing key information to the prosecution. But what's particularly intriguing is the fact that Abel's defense team was able to raise a number of questions about the constitutionality of the espionage laws under which he was charged. This has significant implications for our understanding of the legal framework surrounding espionage and raises important questions about the balance between national security and individual rights. The more we learn about Abel's trial, the more it becomes apparent that the stakes were far higher than initially thought. The U.S. government was deeply concerned about the potential consequences of Abel's espionage and was determined to make an example of him. But as we examine the details of the trial, it's becoming clear that there were many behind-the-scenes machinations that have yet to be fully explored. It's now clear that the CIA and FBI were involved in a number of secret negotiations with the Soviet Union, and that Abel's trial was just one part of a much larger game of cat and mouse. But as we delve deeper into this aspect of the story, it's becoming clear that the truth is far more complex and nuanced than initially thought. As we continue to unravel the threads of Abel's operations, it's becoming clear that the world of espionage is far more complex and multifaceted than we ever could have imagined. The more we learn about Abel's story, the more it becomes apparent that he was just one part of a much larger puzzle, and that the true extent of his operations may never be fully known. But that's what makes this story so fascinating, the fact that there are still so many unanswered questions, and that the truth is still waiting to be uncovered. As we move forward, it's becoming clear that the story of Rudolf Abel is far from over, and that there are many more twists and turns yet to come. One of the most intriguing aspects of Abel's story is the fact that he was able to maintain a sense of normalcy and routine, even as he was leading a double life as a spy. He was known to have had a number of close relationships, including a long-term romance with a woman who was unaware of his true identity. But what's particularly striking is the fact that Abel was able to use these relationships to his advantage, often using his charm and charisma to gather intelligence and build trust with his targets. This ability to navigate complex social networks and build relationships with key figures was a hallmark of Abel's operations and allowed him to gather intelligence that would have been impossible to obtain through other means. But as we delve deeper into this aspect of Abel's story, it's becoming clear that there are still many unanswered questions. As we examine the details of Abel's personal life, it's becoming clear that he was a deeply complex and multifaceted individual, driven by a range of motivations and desires. While he was undoubtedly a skilled and dedicated spy, he was also a human being with his own strengths and weaknesses. This nuanced and multidimensional portrait of Abel is a far cry from the one-dimensional caricature of the evil spy that is often presented in popular culture. But as we move forward, it's becoming clear that the true extent of Abel's humanity may never be fully known, and that the truth about his life and operations may remain forever shrouded in mystery. The more we learn about Abel's life and operations, the more it becomes apparent that the world of espionage is far more complex and nuanced than we ever could have imagined. The story of Rudolf Abel is a fascinating and intriguing one, full of twists and turns and unexpected revelations. As we continue to unravel the threads of his operations, it's becoming clear that the stakes were far higher than initially thought, and that the true extent of Abel's impact on the Cold War may never be fully known. But that's what makes this story so compelling, the fact that there are still so many unanswered questions, and that the truth is still waiting to be uncovered. As we move forward, it's becoming clear that the story of Rudolf Abel is far from over, and that there are many more surprises yet to come. As we delve deeper into the world of espionage, it's becoming clear that the story of Rudolf Abel is just one part of a much larger narrative. The Cold War was a complex and multifaceted conflict, driven by a range of motivations and desires. But at its heart, it was a struggle for power and influence, with the United States and the Soviet Union vying for dominance on the world stage. Abel's operations were just one part of this larger game, but they have significant implications for our understanding of the Cold War and its legacy. As we continue to explore the details of Abel's story, it's becoming clear that the truth is far more complex and nuanced than initially thought, and that the stakes were far higher than we ever could have imagined. The more we learn about the Cold War, the more it becomes apparent that the conflict was driven by a range of factors, including ideology, economics, and geopolitics. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a struggle for dominance, with each side seeking to promote its own interests and values. But as we examine the details of the conflict, it's becoming clear that the truth is far more complex and multifaceted than initially thought. The Cold War was a nuanced and multidimensional conflict, driven by a range of motivations and desires. And at its heart, it was a struggle for power and influence, with the United States and the Soviet Union vying for dominance on the world stage. As we continue to explore the details of the conflict, it's becoming clear that the legacy of the Cold War is still with us today, and that the truth about its impact and significance may never be fully known. As we move forward, it's becoming clear that the story of Rudolf Abel is just one part of a much larger narrative. The world of espionage is a complex and multifaceted one, driven by a range of motivations and desires. But at its heart, It's a story about human beings, with all their strengths and weaknesses. The story of Abel is a fascinating and intriguing one, full of twists and turns and unexpected revelations. But as we delve deeper into the world of espionage, it's becoming clear that the truth is far more complex and nuanced than initially thought, and that the stakes are far higher than we ever could have imagined. As we continue to explore the details of Abel,